everybody, welcome back up to the Vinyl Attic for another episode of Vinyl Fetish. We are doing our 100 albums that matter count through, 100 albums that are kind of not the obvious choices, and I'm so excited about this one. I didn't expect to be doing this one, but something happened. So if you have been with us for a while, you know the very first album that was discussed in this count through was Van Morrison's classic Astral Weeks. I thought I should start with, you know, what many people would believe is the greatest album ever made. I mean, there's a lot of people that would sing that song. In the process, I rediscovered a Van album that I kind of forgot about, and it has become my absolute obsession. And I now believe that it is on par with Astral Weeks in many ways, because it's an underdog, is even greater than Astral Weeks. We're talking about Van Morrison's 1974 album, Veedon Fleece. Let me tell you about this record. I discounted it. You know, I kind of got into a lot of Van in the 80s, and I might have shared the story about having lunch with Bono. U2 was in town, and Bono and I had become friends from my time in Dublin. And this was, I think, when they were on tour for Unforgettable Fire, and I discovered, you know, Into the Mystic and Astral Weeks, and I sort of whispered, Bono, I get where all your music is coming from. You're just ripping off Van Morrison, and he just went like that. More on Bono in a second. But so I started buying all these Van Morrison records, all the Van Morrison records from the 70s that I missed in early 80s, and just diving into them. And Astral Weeks was the obvious one. Moon Dance being, of course, a big one too. This album, which I got as a cutout, and has this kind of matte cover of him with these dogs, I kind of played and listened to, and then kind of forgot about it. But about a year later, I was in London, and this is a whole nother story for another day, but I had been having, we'll just call it a friendship, a very close friendship with Sinead O'Connor, who I met in Dublin when she was doing Singing Telegrams, and she would let me stay in her apartment in London. And we stayed up all night listening to Joni Mitchell's Hissing in the Summer Grass album, which blew my mind, and this Van Morrison album. This was her favorite Van Morrison album. And then I forgot about it again for a long time, for a couple of decades. And just recently, I'm like, I should play Veedon Fleece. I used to really love that album. And it has consumed my brain. This is such a brilliant record. So here's the backstory of the record. Van, you know, starts this sort of a golden era in the early 1970s. In 1973, he releases Hard Nose the Highway with Warm Love and his great version of It's Not Easy Being Green, made popular by Kermit the Frog, and goes out on tour with the New Caledonia Band. Does this really great tour, of which an amazing live album, Too Late to Stop Now, is released in February of 1974. Too Late to Stop Now, most of which was recorded at the Troubadour in West Hollywood, where I just was 2 weeks ago seeing a show at the Troubadour. Troubadour is still there. So many great acts have passed through those doors. And it's one of the best live albums ever. It captures Van the Man at his most soulful. So Van, in 1967, you know, he's this Northern Ireland artist in this Northern Irish band, Them. You know, when he goes solo, he leaves Ireland. He leaves Ireland for good and never returns. And he does a lot of work in London and then moves to Los Angeles. And it's not, even though he's this great Irish artist, he's completely gone from Ireland. So he goes through this divorce with his first wife, Janet Planet, and decides he needs to go back to Ireland to get some inspiration. Now, this is 1973. And this is the peak of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is really racked by violence. Sunday Bloody Sunday and the IRA and the orange proletarians, not proletarians, Protestants. That's a whole different struggle with the proletarians, the Protestants and the Catholics. And so he comes back with his new girlfriend, who would be his new fiancée, but stays in the Republic, stays in the South, and just travels around soaking in all things Irish. I mean, this is this guy who's kind of defined by the Irish Celtic origins of his music, and now he's finally back home. So he's soaking all this in the literature, in the writings of William Blake, and kind of soaking it all in, and then says, let's go make an album. And he comes in with these bits and pieces of songs that the band just has to riff on, similar to Astral Weeks. He's like, okay, this is the feel of this song. I'm going to sing it. I'm going to strum it on the guitar. I need this relatively small band that include a flute player to kind of fill in the pieces. And what we get is magic. So there is this concept that Van helped popularize, which is that had been around before him, this idea of the stream of consciousness. That there is this muse out there that will tell you what you need to take from the internal and put out into the external world. And on that lunch I had with Bono that day in the mid-'80s, we had a conversation. He was sort of explaining it to me because I'm like listening to all this Van Morrison stuff and kind of reading about the stream of consciousness. I'm also reading James Joyce, reading some William Blake. I'm really sort of diving into it because I've been spending my summers living in Dublin. And the way he explained it to me was there's this river of creativity. The river flows, and you can just step into it and let it take you away. Wide awake. I mean, there's a lot of this in U2's music in the 1980s, especially Unforgettable Fire and the Joshua Tree, where you're just riffing on the vibe. And so what happens is you get an album that doesn't really have songs on it. There's one song, Bulbs, which was the single, which is as close to like a Van Morrison hit as you're going to get on this record. The rest of the stuff, it's just a feeling. It's just him letting go and letting this muse, this stream of consciousness wash over him as he emotes all these themes, these stories about characters, these places like Arco and County Wicklow, which is in the east of Ireland. And you are just transported. And there's this concept of the Veedon Fleece, which is kind of like the Irish version of the Holy Grail, that you're finding this thing that is a source of enlightenment and wisdom and community and artistic vision, sort of bringing you all together into this vision. And so it is it's a trip. It is a trip into this thing, and it's a great record. I mean, imagine, since in those days people were probably a little bit high listening to this music, but this is one of my favorite late night records. It just feels like something in an empty house trying to get out into the fields. I mean, it is a complete emotional experience, this album, Veedon Fleece. And when it came out, it didn't do very well. People were looking for Tupelo Honey. People were looking for Moondance. People were looking for a hit. And it was just sort of Van making sounds and putting random words together and sort of half-telling stories of these characters in this strange place of rural Ireland. It went over like a lead balloon. And it led Van to kind of take about 3 years off. I mean, he didn't really do anything for a while after this record. He appeared in the Last Waltz with the band in 76. That was like the one thing he did. And then in 77, he released A Period of Transition, which was meant to mark, now that phase, that golden phase of Van was gone. But in fact, he revisited the muse in 79 in Into the Music with the great track The Healing Has Begun, 1980 with the common one, and the epic Summertime in England song, which is like a trip through your English literature class. So we would still kind of tap into this, but this was sort of the peak of that moment. The value of this now is when you let artists tap into something that is unique to them. We talked about this a few weeks ago with Willie Nelson's Red-Headed Stranger, that when you let artists tap into something that is a unique voice inside of them, that they have the space, and in Van Morrison's case, a good contract with Warner Brother Records and a producer himself, all of a sudden you get something that is close to pure art. It's not contrived by the needs of the market or the trends of the time or the demands of people telling you, this is what you should do with this music. You have a singular vision by a singular artist. Controversial as he is, I mean, he just put out a record last month. He put out his like 40,000th album, came out last month, and it's not a bad album, but allowed to listen to your art. Brilliant record. If you're a fan of Van and you don't mind recent controversies, put this record on. Put it on late at night, especially if you have a house that has a lot of echoey rooms. Put this record on, and I guarantee you it will transport you not just to County Wicklow in Ireland. It'll transport you to this magical world of the Veedon Fleece. Great. Okay. I have fallen in love with this record for the third time. Listen to it. Oh, it's great. And forget about it. Listen to it with Sinead. Oh, yeah, it's really great. Forget about it for 3 decades. Listen to it. Oh, my God. I freaking cannot stop listening to this album. I cannot stop listening. I'm going to listen to it again tonight. I'm going to spin the vinyl. I mean, there are some really great tracks. I mean, You Don't Pull No Punches, You Don't Push the River is kind of the big epic piece on here. But the opening song, County Fair, which is this waltz. It's just this little waltz that he steps into. This very subtle waltz beat, and then he just steps in with that magical voice, and you're in the land of Van. God damn it, I love this album. It surprised the hell out of me. There are other albums I thought I'd talk. If I'm going to do somebody again, since we've already done one Van Morrison album, I thought I would do like Into the Mystic, Into the Music, or The Common One, or Veedon Fleece. It's all about Veedon Fleece. Cool. Okay. So next time we're going to do a record that might be on some list. I want to talk about it for some different reasons, because it's kind of been not forgotten, but it's kind of been underappreciated over time in terms of its significance. We're going to talk about the very first Van Halen album. Van Halen, very first album, 1978. For a whole generation, this record has deep, deep meaning. So we're going to talk about Van Halen. Can you believe it? We're going to talk about Van Halen. Cool. So that is next time on Vinyl Fetish. But God, I mean, I'm glad Van is still making records. Sometimes he puts out 2 albums a year. This guy's a workhorse. And I know the COVID stuff was stupid, and a lot of people don't want to listen to Van Morrison anymore because he was just so anti-science on all that. But his oeuvre, is that the right word? His body of work is such a testament to this notion of trusting your internal compass. The artist in you, the muse in you that allows you to step into the stream of consciousness and let magic come out. I will always listen to this guy. I've seen him play a couple times, including in Dublin. I was a roadie at a show, a Bob Dylan show, and when Van got up and sang with Dylan, that was pretty great. But Van Morrison, say what you will, Van Morrison matters. This music matters. This album matters. Listen to me. Veedon Fleece matters. You matter, so let's talk about it.